Hello, I'm Cormac. You're listening to Queerly Beloved, supported by Amazon Music. In this series, I invite DJs and musicians, friends and allies from the LGBTQ community to talk about music, queerness, and anything else that shaped their unique story. So my guest today is Chloé Caillet. Chloé is one of the sweetest people on the scene and certainly one of the hardest workers. She has that intense focus that I find quite unique to New Yorkers. Last year, Chloé launched Smile, a community-focused event series with an ethos that champions queer and POC artists. You can find a playlist for all the music mentioned in today's episode and every episode at the link in the episode description. So, here's me talking with Chloé Caillet. I want to ask you, for our listener, who you are, how you identify, and what it is that you do.
So my name is Chloé Caillet. I'm a DJ and a music producer. I identify as she and her. I was born in New York City and I spent most of my life there, but I'm actually French. And then I lived in the UK. I did my A-levels in the UK, funnily enough. And then I moved to New York for university after that. And I'm currently living between Ibiza and the US, basically. And what do I
Wow.
do? Well, yeah, I DJ and I make music.
That's an amazing base to have more than one base and more than one source of input, especially like in more early formative years, like, A-level years or uni, for example, to have so many different inputs. That's such a gift, I imagine.
It's definitely, I resented it as a kid, because as a kid, you want stability and you want your friends and you want your friendship group. And I moved around quite a lot as a kid, which was quite traumatic. But at the same time, now that I look back at every single year of my life as a kid, I'm so grateful for all of the moving, because I definitely got so much inspiration from different countries I lived in, different cities, different music scenes, different friendship groups, different types of people. And I just think that it's definitely a big part of who I am today, and I think musically, every city that I grew up living in as a kid, I definitely draw some kind of inspiration in the music I play or make today.
Wow. I mean, it's not comparable to the level that you experienced, but I think one of the greatest things my family gave me was that we went on vacation every summer. And, I was going on vacation to different countries since I was a kid. And as an adult, I'm kind of fearless when it comes to travel. And I noticed that because I've had partners or friends who might travel with me, once. And I noticed their reservations around travel, their reservations maybe around entering a different culture. And I've just never had that. And I'm pretty sure it comes from traveling and feeling safe as a kid. And I'm so grateful for that as well.
I feel like as a kid, when you are forced to be adaptable, and you're kind of, going from, let's say, you know, one place to another, and you're with your parents and you're landing in a new country and you don't speak the language, but you sort of somehow have to understand the food you're eating, pick up on people's physical language because you don't understand their verbal language. You keep that your whole life. And it's true that when you're older and you travel, adaptability is probably one of the most important things. And I feel like as DJs and artists, it also really is that, as DJs, where so often we land in countries we don't know anything about, or clubs or places, and we just have to fit in the vibe quickly, lick in our USBs and be like, right, this is going to work for this room right now. Um, and it's a pretty crazy thing to think about, because if you have no preconception, you don't speak the language, you've never met anyone from that specific city, it's like, right, it's a very interesting thing to think about, I think.
Yeah. And another aspect of that, I often think as a DJ, very often we don't get to see the city very much or explore the country. We're in and out. But there is a social study that can be made from, you know, the dance floor and different dance floors in different cities. You do get like a little window into what that society is like, I think. I think we have a certain window on things. You get to notice depending on the BPM. Like when I go like north in England, my BPM always goes up, for example. Like I always play a bit harder, a bit tougher, a bit faster. Or like when I play in Italy, I always play a bit faster. Or I don't know, just things that I've kind of learned. There's like a certain energy around certain places that affect how you play, I think.
I mean, 100%. I couldn't have said it more if I tried. I feel like every country has its own thing, and obviously every country has its own history, has its own political climate, has its own food, has its own language. Most places are have their own underground scene, have their own queer communities. It's all very kind of different than every. I couldn't say that there's two countries I've ever been to that are the same. And definitely some cities you play faster, some slower, some a little bit more groovier, some a bit harder. I feel like some cities are a bit more Balearic. Like, for example, Ibiza, you can go a little bit more in that euphoric Balearic moment. But definitely when you're going to the north of England, people want it harder, more, just a bit more tough. It's very interesting that.
I am fascinated that you grew up in New York because I visit New York sometimes to play, and it's like sticking your finger into an electric socket. And for me, in the best possible way. And maybe as a tourist, which is different than, for your experience, but as a tourist, I have such a rose tinted experience of New York. When I go there, I'm just thinking of the music that was made there, the Lower East Side in the 80s, Blondie, early Madonna. Like, I just think of all these incredible music that was kind of formed there and influenced by there. And I love going to New York. I always say, like, I think like in my later years, it would be good to go and live in New York. Because I think if you live in New York for a year, you probably speed your brain up. Like, it's probably like going to the gym for your brain. All my New Yorker friends are super sharp, super fast. Like, there's a certain New Yorker thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because when you grow up there, you don't think about that because that's just how you operate. When you're born, it's like, I literally feel like I'm consistently high in New York. It's like I wake up and my brain is just on and I can just do 5,000 things in one day. And at night, you can go to 15 different venues and then you sleep 3 hours and then you're up and you're doing the same thing. And I lived like that for so many years. I think I was doing at some point like 6 jobs at once, but for some reason you don't get tired. It's one of those cities that just charges you. And I think everyone operates on the same level of energy. So you don't really have anyone that slows you down. It's only when I started traveling and touring outside of New York that I was like, whoa, there's another way to live life where you're not eating a sandwich as you're like running between 3 things. And then you're trying to like get a sip of water between 2 different other things. Yeah. And then you're up at night drinking the whole time. And it's mental.
Yeah. It's similar to London in a way. I feel like in London, there's that edge where people will just fucking tell you how it is. Like if you're out of line, people aren't afraid to tell you. But in New York, I feel like they have that, but they also have the flip of it. So like if somebody really likes how you look, they'll tell you. Like that doesn't really happen in London. The Brits don't really do that, but the Americans will be like, "Hey, you look great," and you're just like, "What?" And I love
amazing.
that there's like, yeah, I just love that there's like the flip side of that. You get like both sides of the coin somehow. There's a positivity there.
Americans like to think themselves as optimists and as positive people. Generally, you're when you grow up there in school, you're told a lot about, wow, you're amazing, you're great. Like you're reinforced a lot about these things. It's definitely a positive culture. And I think for me, like my favorite thing growing up there in my 20s was everything is possible in New York. You know, if you want to be like, New York is the city where I came out, you know, it's the city where I found my fellow queer community. And I'm French, and in France, like I did not come out to my French friends for the longest time, you know, because it's a very different energy. But in New York, it was like, of course, you can be gay and a woman and this and have 5 jobs and run around and be bicultural and whatever the hell you want to be because you're a New Yorker. Like New Yorkers are everything, you know? And I really have to say that like New York is a city that allows you to be that and allows you to wear 5 different hats if you want. You can be a banker by daytime, and at nighttime you can be a drag queen, you know? And by, you know, you can be, you can work, you can be a subway driver, but you could be into the hip hop scene and MC up in the Bronx, you know? It's like you can be all of these things there. And I think I would just say that most people in their life should experience that. It's really inspiring, and it really helps you not label yourself, and it helps you to not box yourself into just, you know, putting one foot in front of the other, you know, because I think people really accept people there. That's at least how I felt. And I love the energy there. It's really, really special.
It's kind of one of one, New York. I think there's nowhere really like it. Did you grow up in a musical household? Were your parents into music?
So it's kind of weird because I'm the first of my entire, from what I know, genealogical, however you say it, family to ever pursue an art form. My parents are more on the business side, and my dad's more on the psychology side. Um, but in the house, there was always music playing, right? So I grew up, my mom's house was more jazz, French, sort of classical French music, classical music as well. Let's say more down tempo, and Spanish music as well, because we have a big Spanish root. And my dad was like the rock and roll sort of like, you know, we'd go listen. My dad loved trance music. So like the first time I listened to like ATB till I come, I probably was like, I don't know, 7. And my dad would like put that on. We would just like dance. So that was the first time I heard like trance music. um, but you know, it was kind of the polar opposites. But music was a big part of what we did. My dad and my mom divorced when I was quite young. But when I'd go see my dad on the weekends, we would go to Central Park, and there was always these hippies kind of having a drum circle, and my dad would take me and we'd go dance.
That's so cute.
And you know, music was there, but it was never like, my dad didn't teach me how to play guitar, my mom didn't teach me how to play piano, you know.
That's so interesting. I mean, for a long time, I thought that there wasn't so much music in our music lineage in my family. And then over time, I kind of realized that there was a lot of kind of Irish traditional music. And my mother came from a kind of Irish traditional musical family. But I think I am the first, I just want to be sure that I'm correct on that. I think I'm maybe the first one to pursue something more professionally. Although I have a lot of talented cousins, a lot of very talented musical cousins. Was it the same for the queer stuff? Are you the only gay in the village?
Well, I am the first, and now I have 3 younger siblings who are all queer.
Ah.
so, so funnily enough, I think I might have inspired the younger ones to be like, yeah, I want to be with a woman. Actually, my little sister was dating an amazing person who actually transitioned while they were together, and my sister was 15.
So amazing.
I was 21 and came out to my parents, who were like, yeah, we're not surprised, but we're happy if you're happy, kind of thing. To then like my siblings being like, I'm gay and I'm gay and I'm bisexual and here's my partner and he is a she and he's transitioning. And my dad was like, okay, like this is it, you know? And
Wow.
I'm really proud, and my parents actually have been very supportive of the journey, which I'm very privileged and thankful for.
That's so beautiful to hear. I'm so happy to hear that. Because I think, sometimes when we don't have maybe other siblings or other uncles or aunts or other people in the family who are queer, it can be quite isolating. So, at the very least, if your family are very accepting, that's a major plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I came out to my family, I was living in New York, and I was actually quite isolated from my family. My mom was in Paris, my dad was in Boston. And so I kind of came out to them, but I already had my community and my thing going on. So I wasn't looking for their, let's say, approval because I wasn't seeing them every day. We were in different
Hmm.
countries, and I was nervous. It's very scary to come out to your parents. It's nerve wracking. It's like, what are they going to say? And it was actually really funny when my grandmother found out. We had a call, and she was like, you know what? If I was born today in your generation, I'd probably be a lesbian too. And I was like, wow. You get the grandma approval. You're like, okay,
Wow.
okay.
That's fascinating because it really says a lot about the self actualization afforded to us that we kind of assume is just our right, and it is, but how that is in terms of time kind of relatively new. I guess our mothers and our grandmothers, it wasn't such an option for them. There was a very kind of clear path laid out for them, and that space to question, do I want to do it? I think a lot of people didn't have it.
I just think that it wasn't even a conversation. You know, Today, if you want to come out, there's so many places you can look for help.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I mean, social media has been amazing for this because I feel like, if you feel lonely, if you don't know what's going on, if you feel isolated, if you kind of feel like you don't have any queer friends or you don't know where to go, like you can go online and start connecting with people through DMs. You can start messaging people. There's specific queer based parties that are exactly where people can go and meet other people. You have dating apps that specifically you can put your preferences. You can slowly build your queer community today. Whereas I feel like probably for our parents and our great, my grandmother, like if she would have come out being like, I'm a lesbian to her village, like I don't think she would have met anyone, nor were there very many queer raves going on or, like
Yeah.
information on what she might have been feeling.
Maybe it's yet to come. Maybe she's going to have a renaissance of sorts.
I'm pushing for it. I'm always for people just being who they want to be. It's really beautiful.
Is there a record or a track that reminds you of growing up in your family, of the early days? Maybe something that was played around the house. You mentioned Till I Come is a good
Yeah,
one.
that's a good one.
Mm.
It's so funny because I actually, until this call today, I never thought about that, but my dad loves trance music and he had it on CD and he played that record for me like countless amount of times. And he was like, I love trance music.
Hmm. And around the time when you were coming out, like you mentioned, you had your community support, which was very important, and it kind of gives us that, until I had friends who accepted me and my queerness, I didn't really have any reasons to be happy about being gay. And when you talk
Mm-hmm.
about now and people's ability to reach out and find community, that's just so important because there are role models and good role models and good examples of what life can be. And I didn't really have those. So until I fell in love, for example, or until I found my friends, I didn't have the courage or the confidence to say, this is what I am and it's good. So having that community around is just, I think it's so vital. I want to ask you, like, when you were hanging out and finding your community in those early days and taking your first steps into your authenticity. What music were you listening to?
Oof. So I was in New York City throwing parties. It was a combination. It was a lot of rock and roll, to be honest. Like, we used to go out to clubs in New York and we used to listen to kind of open format, right? So it was everything from rock and roll to house music to more 90s hip hop. There wasn't necessarily a genre with it. But I'd say rock was kind of always there for me. I was playing in a rock band at the time in New York. I mean, the early days when you start to figure out that you're attracted to the same sex is like, it's like a renaissance, right? Because you're like, wow, this feels amazing. And like suddenly you're starting to flirt with people and you have to navigate the scenes about like who's gay or not, or does it matter? But New York was definitely a really interesting place to come out in.
Did you have any early pop crushes like when you were a kid?
Oh my God. Avril Lavigne was like I think that's my first celebrity crush, but I was 12.
Oh, wow.
And it's only now that I look back at it where I'm like, oh my God, like I bought her album, went to her concert, waited outside her concert for her to like sign my poster, had the poster hanging in the room. She gave me a guitar pick.
That's so cute.
And now I look back at it, I'm like, I definitely was in love with her. But like when you're 12, you're like, oh, she's amazing.
I can totally see why she would be a more lesbian crush in a way, like for sure, because she was very rebellious and doing it herself and playing guitar. And you can totally see that. It makes sense in retrospect, I guess.
I was a tomboy growing up. So like, I played soccer. I never wore pink. I only wore boys' clothes. And she was the first one to kind of come out on major MTV and, all of these things that I used to watch, music videos, and to kind of be that crossover boy figure, kind of publicly in my generation, and that made rock music. And it was cool. I remember as a kid being like, wow, she's so badass. Like, I want to be like her.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. And those first records are honestly, when I still hear them sometimes on the radio, you can't help yourself but just smile and sing to them. They're great records.
Let's come to your early clubbing days. So you're in New York, you're going out, you're raving, you're clubbing, there's rock, there's hip hop. Is there a track in particular that reminds you of that time?
My early raving days were actually in Paris when I was 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a club called the Social Club, which
I remember. I think I might have even played there. Is that possible?
Yeah.
I remember Paris Social Club was like really a thing like in the early noughties.
Mm-hmm. It was. And this track came out, it was 2007, so I was 15. And we were all out and sort of Justice were having their moment, the Klaxons. It was all this sort of electro clash music. MGMT had just dropped Kids. And Digitalism came out with this record, Zadarlight.
Yes.
And I remember listening to that record and we were out at the club, but it was just like this record that I just kept playing and playing and playing and playing. And then I then downloaded it on LimeWire because we used to use LimeWire.
Yeah.
And I had that in my iTunes library. And I actually did my Essential Mix last year and I found a really cool edit of it. And I put that one in my Essential Mix because I was like, that was a real record that like I remember having some fun nights to that track.
It's so great that you name that track and that time. It really trips me back to like Kitsune. And also I can see the trajectory there between something like The Clash and Digitalism or Justice, for example, because there's like this kind of punky rocky thing that's also present there. And I think even Digitalism did like an edit of The Cure as well. I think they did like
They did.
Fire in Cairo. Yeah. And The Rapture, for example, like when The Rapture came out around that time, that was very reminded me of The Cure, The Clash or something. So there's really a connection there. It was almost like a more electronic sounding version of really good rock and roll.
So before the sort of electronic stuff, I used to play in a rock band in Paris, and we used to go to these nights on Fridays, which were sort of like battle of the bands type thing. And it was actually in a venue called the Triptyque, which was the venue prior to the social club, but in the same building.
Okay.
And I really grew up with like a heavy rock and roll influence in my life. Like it was rock and roll was everything. I used to wear the leather jacket, the skinny jeans, the little white shoes. I had the haircut. I used to listen to all this psychedelic, crazy sort of rock, and I was like a rock digger. I really went in as much as I could. I used to collect these things called the Nuggets, which were like these compilations of really rare psychedelic rock tracks from the 60s, and like that was my thing. And then suddenly electronic music came with this, yeah, as you said, this like rock and roll electronic mesh, sort of electro clash. And there were incredible artists that kind of mixed it. Like the Klaxons did stuff like that. Justice were like, that first album was just like,
It's massive.
it blew me out of the park. Like it was just like the production, the way they mix all this stuff together. I mean, you could talk about New Order a bit prior, but New Order was like a big reference for us sort of in the French music world because they used a lot of electronic, but obviously rock with influences from Joy Division, and sort of new wave. And then moving to New York, suddenly it was like all the DFA records, so it was like this continuation of that with LCD Sound System, who probably to this day are one of my favorite bands, and really kind of mix the sort of synth modular type sounds with electronic music, with pop vocals, with song formats, and it's just brilliant music.
It's fucking great. And it's so great that you mentioned it. You're actually the first of my guests to kind of highlight that particular moment and that particular collision of different influences. And it was it was massive in London as well.
Yeah, I remember.
So good. And again, it's that kind of meeting point of like New York, the French thing. Daft Punk were kind of in there in a different way, like they were a bit more like less rocky but still had that very kind of
French touch disco.
Yeah, that French touch disco. It's a good way to say it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, Daft Punk were the gods of all of us, I think, as French, producers in terms of what they kind of created. And I think Ed Banger was the graduation of that in a way, with
oh my God,
incredible producers like Mr. Oizo, who's still like Flatbeat is
incredible.
It's still a record that you hear in the club. Like it's still a record that is still so relevant and kicks ass in the club, Same with like DJ Mehdi, Brodinski.
Yeah.
There was so much good music being made, and it was quite weird music at times too. I remember listening to some tracks and I was like, this is wild.
We did a party in London and we just took a chance and invited Mr. Oizo to come and DJ, and we thought he'll say no, and he said yes. And I think he said yes because like his French friend, like Miss Kitten and the Hacker, had come to play, and like it was just the right moment to ask him, and he came to play. And it was honestly at that time one of the best DJ sets I'd ever heard. Like he was playing on a Pioneer, and he was DJing like he makes music. So he was like, not that the music was fast, but his mixing was fast. He was using parts of each track like as samples. So he was like in and out with things, and it was an amazing chaos to it, but it was so brilliant what he did. And I remember going to the booth after he played, and the mixer was like at an angle. It was like he'd like slid the mixer down a mountain or something. Like he'd been really active in the booth. And it was such a great DJ set. I don't know if he DJs so much actually, but it was really one that I remember very, very well. So talented.
There's so many artists of that. I mean, you mentioned Miss Kitten and the Hacker, who to this day, like Miss Kitten is also such a French icon who just kept going from that. And I think like a lot of her records are just, I don't know, just still in my mind with her voice. It's just like, it's crazy to have. France really was like a really important place for music, and there's a lot of people that came from that. And I think it's crazy to think how many artists actually no longer really you see their names anymore, but still had such an impact in that moment and must have inspired. I mean, they inspired me, you know? So, and I'm only one person. So I wonder how many people are still incorporating certain of these sounds and productions into what they do today.
Yeah, I think Miss Kitten and the Hacker, they still get a lot of reverence. Kitten has been a big influence and inspiration to me. She was playing a lot at our party in London, and we've become good friends. And she was always very has always been very supportive of me and very good with advice and stuff. And when it comes to her music, I feel like it launched 1,000 imitations. It inspired a lot of people to try something similar, but nobody could do it. It was like,
Yeah, because it's her voice. It's her voice on top of these tracks. It's so charming and eerie and cool.
and it shouldn't work in a way, and it does. And you know, like her and Michelle, they made that album in their bedroom, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's just insane. And there's lyrics on it that make me laugh to this day. Like there's this lyric where she says like, and we're gonna go around the world and then come back to the center of everything, Grenoble. It's like, it's really funny. Like there's like such a humor to it. There's a naivety to it, which is so beautiful. And I think they captured, you know, music can be so zeitgeist in a way, in that there's a scene, there's a political situation, there's a club that's happening, there are things that happen, and when they happen together, you can't really do that by design. It's just these things that come together, and it's like Electroclash was one of them, for example, or punk was one of them, or you know, like the mod thing is one of them. That is like a soundtrack for a certain moment in music. I think there are so many people who love that first album from Miss Kitten and the Hacker.
It's the masterpiece, you know, I think. And it's so interesting because as you just said, it's almost like the soundtrack of that moment, right? And I feel like right now with the world, I'm really excited to kind of look back 10 years from now and be like, wow, that was the album. That was our moment. Because I don't know what moment we're in right now, but things are definitely a little crazy, depending on where you're based. But you know, it's we're definitely in an interesting time right now.
The thing I would say that I really enjoy about this time, at least from what I witness, um, is that I think within our community, people support each other more. I hope. You know, I think it's not so long ago when DJs were a bit more competitive, maybe a bit less together. And at least I think within the queer community, I think there's a lot of support. At least I witness a lot of support. And I definitely feel for myself when I see another queer DJ do well, I always think a win for one of us is a win for all of us, you know, and I love to
Mm.
see queer excellence. I just love to see it because, you know, that little kid growing up in New York, you know, the more examples that we have to look up to, the better. It's interesting that you wrote, or that you mentioned about, as a woman, oh, but can she DJ? A trans friend taught me how to DJ, and I was always attracted to female DJs. And I think that was because I could sense that defiance in the face of adversity. And I noticed, you know, I used to go and watch, like, for example, Kitten playing or other female DJs playing, and there would be guys standing around the booth like watching the mix. Like that used to literally happen, where there was this idea that, oh, it's a girl DJ. But the result of that was that all the women I knew who were DJing were fucking badass because they had to be,
Yeah.
you know? And I wanted to learn from them always.
It's just so crazy that that was just not that long ago. You know, that's what just like
Yeah.
blows my mind. I mean, another DJ who I was just speaking to a friend about is Chloe, the other Chloe, you know, who
French Chloe,
is French Chloe, such an incredible DJ.
and such an incredible person.
Yeah, like I just saw her play at Panorama. I was watching like a magician, you know,
Yeah.
like in the fucking mix of it. It was just like wow. And I just think that there's something also when, and I don't know if that's just me, but when you see a female DJ, right, a woman, or even a queer artist DJ, there's a lot of love that goes into it, you know, because I feel like there's some kind of, I don't know what's the word, sensitivity to the music, you know. When I see my
Hmm.
female sort of friends taking over the booth, it's just so sexy and sensual, and there's a way of mixing that's just, it's really like, I don't know, I've always been really, I don't know if the right word is like enthralled into it, but I'm always like, wow, I don't know, I just feel it. It's amazing.
Is there a record that you can think of from your early DJ sets that you might have dropped?
Yeah, so there's actually a record. It was Secret Sunday Ignition, I believe is the order of that. And it's the Greg Wilson edit. And I used to play that record every set as soon as there was a couple people in the room to get the room
Uh-huh.
grooving. I used to love playing warm up sets because I could play a lot more like wonky disco, sort of fun music.
That's a great record. I mean, everything Greg Wilson touches, I love his edit of Adonis No Way Back as well. And
Incredible.
it's so incredible. But you mentioned again being a warm up DJ. All of that is a great investment into being a great DJ because you learn to read the start of the club, the end of the club, the middle of the club. Like you learn a lot of skills. You almost like kind of learn how to become three different types of DJ. And I think I have friends, who kind of made a record or made a track and then suddenly they're DJing and they're DJing like headline slots and they have to learn that really fast, but they don't really know the other stuff. And I think being a touring DJ perhaps can be quite different in a way than being a resident DJ, for example. I mean, but definitely being a resident DJ can help you as a touring DJ.
I think the best DJs are the ones that can play anytime, anywhere, any stage, any set, before anyone and after anyone. You know, it's adaptability because at the end of the day, a DJ's role is to play records to a dance floor and get people moving, right? And I feel like the art of DJing has shifted a lot from being this person that no one knows where they are. They're in the back of the club. No one even knows what the DJ looks like. I mean, back in the day, no one knew what DJs looked like. To now being this like frontal position where there's a stage, there's a DJ, there's lights, there's CO2 cannons, there's all of these things, and it's a performance. And people are on their phones. And I don't think that DJs are being tested, you know, because playing a headline slot is pretty simple. You know, it's 90 minutes. You got to play about 11 records. That all bang. You just have to understand how to mix a kick in, kick out, drums in. And in my opinion, you know, I don't think that's challenging. I think it's challenging in a way of holding a room and playing and giving your energy to a big room. But when I really look at DJs playing, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hour sets and understanding how to take a room from A to here to B to C and then ending the room with like a closing moment and really taking me on a journey, that's when I'm like, wow, that was incredible. And I feel like there's a little lack of that today. As you just said, there's so many things like TikTok and these platforms that allow for records to go viral. But just because you've made a viral record doesn't mean you're a good DJ as well. And it's challenging because people expect you to go out there and play the records. But DJing is something you don't learn overnight, you know? I mean, I've been doing it for 8 years, but I feel like I'm only just now understanding. I kind of feel like I know a little more about what I'm talking about. But you know, it takes years to understand the technicality, your records, understanding the labels that you like, the music that you like, the eras, the different genres, the different styles, how to hold a room, how to feel a room, how to connect to your audience. It's definitely something that takes years and takes a lot of time digging and researching. I feel.
It's interesting you mentioned the TikTok thing because that's also, I feel, conditioning people's brains into this 30 seconds of intensity. Like that's what people are seeking. And, I want to hear the start of a record, the middle of a record, and the end of a record. Like I have patience around music and I wonder sometimes, are we losing that? I think it's very important to slow down sometimes. Like I like playing longer sets as well because I can slow down and, the BPM can change and, oh, it's like, okay, this is 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, this is 7 o'clock in the morning, and just, just, to change it up. And I wonder sometimes with this kind of 30-second dopamine hits and, because I played last year at a festival and they had, the traditional more techno stage, the traditional more house stage, and then they had a TikTok stage. And I was like,
What?
okay, here we go.
What do you mean a
Yeah.
TikTok stage?
They had like a stage where uh the curation there was people who were big on TikTok. Yeah.
Wow, 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 wow.
It's all evolution somehow. Like I really am reluctant to hate on things because I feel like, yes, of course I can be concerned about where things are going, but there must be some good in some things, like there might be things that kind of add as well when we look back at it. For example, music videos were really terrified artists when they first started to make music videos, and people would say things like, well, I don't see why I have to now become a performer. I'm a musician and all I want to do is play music. I don't want to have to make a music video. But I mean, where would we be without music videos now? Like music videos and aesthetics and those things really have, I feel, contributed to music.
Yeah.
And I wonder, will there
Yeah.
be some things in these moments that are contributing? I don't necessarily see them yet. I don't necessarily see the contribution yet, but maybe there's some good to come out of it.
I'm like you, I'm not a hater. I love seeing change. People tend to be fearful because it's different than what they know and it's different than what they're used to. But obviously, with every change, there's good and there's bad. And I feel like today, one thing that I'm seeing is, when I'm playing music now and when I play shows, the diversity of people that come to see me play, some of them have never even been to a rave before, but somehow they've found my music because it's linked to someone else that might be TikTok, but the algorithm somehow takes them to me. And then they're coming to me and then they're seeing me. And then through me, they're seeing other artists and other artists and other artists. And you have to start somewhere,
Hmm.
And I feel like the fact that electronic music today is such a big TikTok thing. You're seeing all of these big drops, you're seeing all of these things. Well, at least people are listening to dance music to some capacity, and you never know where their ears are going because, okay, they might start with, let's say, John Summit, but then from John Summit, they might end up here watching this podcast. And from watching this podcast, they might go listen to Miss Kitten. And then they might go, and you just never know what people's journeys are, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel is the power today of what's going on is it's attracting people into this world and it's opening the dance floor to these people that just because they are on TikTok doesn't mean they're not good people. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people out there that are fantastic and that need a community and that would love to be part of a queer community because they want to come out, and you never know what impact it has. And I think closing doors and being judgmental and kind of saying, oh, these people is not the correct angle. It's actually saying, okay, how can we educate these people?
Hmm.
Okay, they want to come. You guys should check out this album. This artist is amazing. This album changed my life. This artist is someone who, significantly inspired me. And I think that's more where artists should come to today and not be haters because hate doesn't change.
I'm so into it. I think on one of your answers also we were talking about like early sets and early inspirations from things you might have heard in a rave or things that you would have played in your first set, and you mentioned Andy Weatherall. Do you want to talk a bit about Andy?
Yeah, that was I was in New York. I don't know how old, maybe 22. And Resolute back then was throwing pretty underground raves. This is 10 years ago, approximately. And I got invited to go to Resolute. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning, after hours. And I remember walking into this giant warehouse. It was quite empty. And there was like this stage, little circular mini stage, and this man was playing. I didn't know anything about him. I knew nothing. And I remember seeing this man, his mustache, his hair, his head down, cigarette, and just one earphone. And I remember just seeing that, and I was like, who is this person, you know? And suddenly this like chuggy, rocky house music was just going. And I remember just sitting on the dance floor, just listening. And I was like, this is probably one of the coolest DJs I've ever seen in my life. I was like, this is it. Like, this guy is the man, you know, he's the GOAT. And I remember he was playing, and I managed to Shazam one record. And it was this one record by Lord of the Isles called Radio Lollipop, which was this slow down. It's about 116 BPM, just really slow, chuggy kind of progressive track. And I remember going home the next day being like, I can't believe I got this track, and like listening to it on repeat, repeat, repeat. And that just became like, yeah, one of the DJs that I think the most inspired me, because his ability to stay true to who he was as an artist, right? So the way that he performed, the way that he was so him. And the music he played just really moved me. It was the combination of this, obviously his rock and roll background, his rock and roll history. I mean, he produced one of my favorite Primal Scream albums, you know, which to this day is like one of the albums that I can't get enough of, you know? And then seeing him play electronic and seeing him move the dance floor with these electronic beats, I was just like, this is so cool. And I never got to meet him. I never got to say this to him, but yeah, he was definitely a big inspiration to me.
That Screamadelica album, I remember listening to that in my bedroom, and it was really around that time where acid house and house music was really infiltrating like the pop charts. And that album just bridged so much, because having him as the producer, there was also this rocky thing to it somehow. And it's kind of fascinating, and so talented that he could make that album with them. It was pretty brilliant. And I had the blessing to play on a lineup with him once, and he played before me, and he played this I'd never met him, and he played this track from Susie and the Banshees, and I recognized it because it was from a new Susie album when she did this solo album. And I thought, I have to ask him what that remix was. And I went to him and I said, oh, I'm like really humbled to be on a lineup with you. I'm a big fan. He's so sweet, like very humble and gentle and friendly. And he said, oh, it's a remix I've been doing. I just finished it. And he gave me the CD. Like, he didn't know me. We
Wow.
just met, and he gave me the CD of the remix that he just finished. And I was like, what? And I still have it. Yeah, lots of people have these stories with him. It's like he was just very kind and very humble.
I think most legends are actually. You know, recently I had a similar experience with Laurent Garnier, who I just played with. And Laurent Garnier is like, for me, as a French artist, it's like the god. And he was so nice and humble and thankful. And I was just like, wow, that's really moving. And he came to listen to my set 30 minutes before I finished. And he was just sitting there, just moving his head. And I feel like every artist should have that kind of energy, you know? Just be nice. If someone asks you what record it is, tell them what record it is. You know, if someone
Yeah.
is curious enough to be like, wow, I love that record. Like, what was that? Tell them what it is. You know, don't gatekeep. Don't Just be
Yeah.
nice. It goes a long way. And I think for, you know, you've had an experience like that. We all have as artists, and we remember that, you know?
Maybe what happens with certain people is that they don't take it for granted where they are, and maybe what comes with that is some openness and kindness. I hope. I think it's lovely when to experience that with people.
100%. And I also think that, you know, you should never take for granted where you are. Should never take for granted people that love you, people that follow you, your friends that show up to your shows, you know, the fans that show up, the people that buy the tickets, the sound engineers. the bartenders, the security, everyone is there to make a good thing happen, and everyone is there, and everyone deserves to be treated kindly, nicely, and to be, you know, yeah, to just be respected. And I feel like a lot of the my favorite DJs that I've met, like as in like DJs that I look up to, have all been so wonderful and nice and respectful and friendly. And I just see the way they treat people, and I'm like, wow, I want to be like in my 40s and 50s and just being this nice human being. Like that's so wonderful. I love that. I look up I get inspired by that.
People used to say that to me, that as a DJ, oh, we give a lot. And I used to think, I didn't really understand it, because I was also getting so much from DJing and getting so much from being with music. And I never really understood that we actually give a lot. And now I realize we give a lot, because it's kind of that thing of how you feel in the booth, you know. For me, a lot of my DJing is about the meditation of, where is my mind right now? What am I connecting to right now? What am I focusing on right now? And I feel like that often is translating into what I'm playing. And I kind of want to know how you replenish yourself, and how you stay well, and how you stay full as a traveling DJ on the road.
I do a lot. I'm not gonna lie. A big part of the job is looking after yourself. And I will say, you have one body and one mind. And if your body goes, you can't perform. If your mind is not in the right place, you can't give. And I've experienced a lot of mental health things when I was younger. I mean, even recently, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of periods of depression, of just being like, not feeling like I could do more. And I suddenly realized, I was like, doesn't take that much to keep yourself in check, right? It's balancing. And you have to remember that as a touring artist, you're performing like an athlete.
Mm.
And you have to treat your body like an athletic performance, in the sense of, you need to work out, you need to stay in shape, which is something I do all the time. You need some kind of mindfulness practice, whether that's a meditation, which is what I practice most every morning if I can, if my alarm's not too early and I have to jump on a plane.
Yeah.
Some kind of journaling, going for walks, connecting to nature, spending some time alone, not looking at your phone all the time. Um, kind of having a balance, because if you're always switched on and you're always on the go and you never have a moment just for yourself, you're going to go crazy.
Yeah.
Your brain, there's only so much adrenaline and stimulation your brain can handle. I found that, for me, I moved to nature, which has really helped me to balance my days off from the weekend. I have a therapist, I'm in therapy all the time. It's really good to have someone external to the chaos to just
Yeah.
vomit on.
Hmm.
I try to eat well, limit the drinking, limit the partying,
Yeah.
try to really push forward the sleep when I can.
Yeah.
And surrounding yourself by friends, and really putting the time into friendships, because I think friends are the one people that can keep you in check and keep you in line and remind you of the person you are, and tell you when you're not doing well, or remind you when you're doing great,. And just support you.
Yeah.
So it's not one thing, it's a lot of things, but the most important thing, I feel, is giving yourself space, and giving yourself time, and give yourself love, and remember that this rat race can be stopped and put on pause.
Yeah. I mean, you've learned that through experience, I can tell, because you mentioned yoga. While I was DJing, and things were kind of up and down, and sometimes I had gigs and sometimes I had less gigs. And I was also a yoga teacher. I had two careers, not careers, I had two jobs.
No
And
way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was a yoga teacher for a long time, and I really I was quite successful as a yoga teacher also. I was teaching on teacher trainings and doing various things. And very often when people come to yoga, it's because they're injured and they have to go to yoga. So they kind of get there through being a little bit broken. And my self-care practice, such as meditation and therapy and being with friends and laughing every day and being in nature, getting a dog, all of those things, they came because I had to make changes, you know. They came because I realized that how I was doing things just wasn't working. Like I had depression, I was in addiction. So like I feel like those things are things that we learn as we go along. It's lovely to hear you speak about them because I think they're great examples of how to do it.
Listen, humans, we make mistakes, we learn, we grow, right? And that's the point of being alive and going through life. And I think you have to go through something to feel it to then make a change. And, the temptations are there every day. You push your bodies to crazy extremes, like crazy sleep deprivation. You have to show up, play, perform, get on a plane, go, go. It's like this it's insane. There's days when I'm like, I'm not going to make it to the next gig. I'm so tired. And that, well, in the past, I drank the night before and I really didn't play good. So maybe if I stop drinking the night before and I still am tired, I can play better, and you try it and you're like, oh, and I feel better. Okay, cool. I'm going to limit my drinking now. And that works for me. And, it's all step by step. People who tell me I'm going to stop everything and meditate every day and go to yoga every day and it's too much. It's sort of like one step at a time. Try things that work for you. Once you implement them as a habit, then bring something else on. Yoga is an amazing practice that I found recently. I started doing it about 6 months ago and changed my life. Like, I don't even know. Like, it changes the way you see the world, your way of reacting to situations, the way you hold your body, the way you treat yourself. But I don't think 5 years ago, when I was struggling with extreme anxiety, I was able to really take the benefits of yoga because it was too much of a change. So, you have to get to the places you have to get to by being patient, taking your time, listening to yourself, and also just trusting the process of where you're landing.
And also, as you say, like being compassionate to yourself, that's such a lovely, vital, important thing is learning to be a friend to yourself. I had to learn that because I had so much self loathing and self criticism for many years that, learning to be compassionate and support myself in my mistakes. Like when I got sober, for example, I remember one of the biggest things that I learned was, if you think you fucked up, go and do something nice for yourself. And that was like when someone said that to me, I was like, what the fuck? Because, when I thought I didn't do something well, or with perfectionism, if I thought, oh, I didn't handle this well, or I got too wasted, or these things, I used to kind of punish myself mentally and give myself a lot of anxiety about it. And then someone said to me in recovery, you're a human being, like you're going to fuck up. Those are the times to be compassionate and loving and caring to yourself. Nobody learns through shame. And I was like, what the fuck? Nobody told me that.
You're like, I wish I learned that in school, but no.
Yeah, I think it's maybe part of also being a recovering Catholic. Like, shame's like part of the game in that one.
Wow. I mean, I can be so hard on myself, even though everything's going great. I'm like, it's not good enough. And then my mom is like, give yourself a hug. I'm like, no. She's like, come on, Chloe, like, pat yourself on the back, like, be kind to yourself. It's, as a DJ, it's like, oh my God, I had a late night and now I'm hungover and my career is like, okay, you had a late night. It's okay. Just relax, take some deep breaths. Don't do it tomorrow. It's, you have to learn as human beings. And I think that the biggest thing is, don't be ashamed of making mistakes. Don't be ashamed of asking for help. Don't be ashamed of trial and erroring. Everyone is made up differently. Everyone has different levels of what they can take, of the balance they need, of the amount of sanity they need on the road. I have friends who can tour, party, and they're fine. I
Mm-hmm.
personally can't do that. If I tour and I party and I have late nights and I lack sleep, I'm a disaster. Like, I can't perform well. I don't want to be in the studio when I get home on Monday. I'm not nice to my girlfriend. I don't want to take my dog for a walk. Like, everyone gets the grunt of it, you know? But if I'm relatively balanced and I'm good and I'm practicing what works for me, I'm a better human to myself and to others. So I learned for me like what works. But that's taken me, as you said, trial and erroring and messing up and being ashamed and being like, Chloe. And then now I'm like, okay, Chloe, love yourself, give yourself love, look where you're at. It's okay.
And that thing you say about, like, it not being good enough, or it's not where you want it to be. I think looking at this DJ life as a series of moments has really helped me, of like, this is a moment, and to take it out of this context of like, where does this moment lead, or where was I before? It's like, this is just a moment to be enjoyed. This mix that I've just done, it's something to enjoy, or playing at that party. It's a moment to enjoy, because we never know. And sometimes I think if you're looking at a DJ job or DJ career in terms of like, where am I going? What's next? You don't really enjoy the moments. You don't take time to enjoy your wins, and you don't enjoy it as much.
I think one of the most important life lessons that I learned, and I think my dog taught me, was to be present, right?
Yeah.
Because animals only think about food, sleep, and playtime. That's it. Those are their concerns.
And every day is the best day of their life.
Yeah. And they don't remember the day before, and they don't think about the day of tomorrow. You know, they're present.
Yeah.
And as humans, we're consistently living in the past, the future, instead of just being like, okay, let's be here now. Wow, I just threw a party at Village Underground on Saturday. It was amazing. I'm so grateful to have done that.
Yes.
Take that in, live with that moment, and then move on to the next moment. I don't know. You just have to remember to be true to who you are in that moment and just be present and to take in the right things, to take in the energies, to take in your surroundings. And life becomes more enjoyable because suddenly, as you said, it's a lot of moments. And these moments, you remember them and you have an emotion tied to them. And your friends are like, oh, do you remember that set you played? And like, there was that guy dancing and he really loved what you were doing. And you're like, yeah, I remember that because I was paying attention because
Yeah, I
I was
remember it
present.
then. Yeah. Yeah. It's mindfulness, basically, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
Mm.
it's like whenever I get to the airport and there's like a friendly person at the airport or a friendly person who gives me my passport back, I'm like, thank you. And I look at them in the eyes because, I try to take in little moments throughout the day. It just makes things more enjoyable, I swear, than when you're just head down, not paying attention, in your mind, thinking about 10,000 scenarios going
Yeah.
on. And it helps with anxiety. It helps with depression. It helps with practicing gratefulness. And,
Yes.
there's days when you're on the road and you're like, I can't believe I have to fly again. I just want to go home. And then you're like, 10 things I'm grateful for. And you're just like looking around, being like, oh, number one, my God. And then suddenly you get to
Yes.
10 and you're like, okay, we're smiling. We're smiling. And like my girlfriend does that to me. She's like, Chloe, you're here because you want to be here. Stop complaining. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. Moment,
Yeah.
gratefulness. Let's be grounded.
Do you have music that you lean on in those times? Do you have like an album you go back to, or an artist that you love?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up listening to Pink Floyd my whole life. They're probably my favorite artists of all time.
Hmm.
They're artists that through times of depression, anxiety, fear, all these things, weird teenage, I don't even know what. Times even on the road when I just need inspiration and I just put on their music and it takes me somewhere. It takes me on a journey. Richard Wright, who's the keyboard player, is probably one of my favorite keyboard players of all time. David Gilmour, the guitarist, is such a great guitar player. Roger Waters, who's an incredible songwriter and bass player. It's just their formula and their music. Yeah, it's just taken me to places, pretty crazy places.
Well, I mean, they're one of the most critically acclaimed bands of all time. I mean, I think that album they also kind of wrote about the struggles of success and the struggles of touring and things. It's quite interesting to choose that album. It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, The Dark Side of the Moon is. I mean, what's crazy to me is it took them 8 albums to get to that album. And if you listen to their whole journey and the early Sid Barrett days and like kind of the way that they got to that expression as a
Was he
unit,
the one that left? He died or he
he's the one that
left?
left.
He left.
He was very heavily into sort of psychedelics and kind of,
Oh yeah.
I believe, developed some kind of mental health issues and could no longer perform. And so he left Pink Floyd, and then Floyd kind of developed into what it was. But the early Sid Barrett stuff, like the song Bicycle, is just like, it's wild music. It's just super trippy. But yeah, Floyd is, they're very raw, they're very honest, they're very political. The Wall is just like, if you see the movie, it's mind blowing. They're definitely artists that I like because they're very unconventional. And if you listen to Dark Side of the Moon from A to Z, it's probably the most unconventional album you've ever heard, but it's still one of the best selling albums of all time. And Pink Floyd lovers kind of find themselves in the world. And my dad is probably the biggest Pink Floyd fan. So as a young kid, he would just walk me through every single song from A to Z and tell me who was playing on it and the whole thing. So like, I grew up in that kind of environment.
Do you have a track that you are really crazy about at the moment that you're playing? You just remixed Dua Lipa, I believe.
I did do a remix of Dua Lipa. It was really fun to remix her record. She's such an iconic pop star.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun one. That was really, really fun.
Chloé, I could talk to you for so long. I mean, I really enjoy our chats and I love what we talked about today. I feel like we went quite deep and you have lovely articulation and you speak so well. And I mean, these are always the chats that I kind of want to have at after hours, but now I just get to have them on this podcast instead.
That's so fun to create your own conversations. I love it.
I'm so grateful that you took the time to join me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure to be on here and get to know you more through this lovely conversation.
Oh. You've been listening to Queerly Beloved with me, Cormac. Since you've listened right to the end, I wanted to give you a heads up that for each series of Queerly Beloved, I want to start highlighting the work of a queer charity or organisation worth supporting. For Season 2, I've chosen notaphase.org, a charity committed to supporting and uplifting the lives of trans adults through community and joy. You can find a link to Not a Phase at the link in the episode description, as well as playlists for all the music mentioned in today's episode and every episode. While you're there, please do hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my conversations with more talented people. A big thanks to Michael Lane, my producer, to my manager, Melissa Taylor at Tailored Communication, and of course to Amazon Music for their support, and to you, the listener. Until next time, take care of yourself. All the best. Bye.